Welcome to the Body in Balance podcast. Today I had a really great conversation with former professional dancer and now registered dietitian Jody Herman. She and I talked about everything dancer nutrition related, in particular REDs and deficiencies in dancers' nutrition. It's a really great conversation. It really shines a light on a topic that is, quite frankly, not talked about. And it's an important one to have because it affects so many things, from injuries to mental health to career longevity. And hopefully with conversations like this, we can start to shift the culture from the old norms into a new space where this is not a taboo topic and we can all just strive towards better overall health. So a little bit about how this started. We've had a couple injuries. I'm the rehearsal director for Sacramento Ballet too. And so our people range from like age 18 to 22.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had a few injuries, a few shin injuries, a few ankle injuries, mostly like bony injuries. And one of our therapists here was like, it seems like there's an uptick in this, like it's higher than normal. What do you
Mm-hmm.
feel about it? How do you feel about that? And so I reached out to a former athletic trainer of ours in Houston, and she said that it's not necessarily a new thing, that this is very common for this age group and very common for these types of dancers that leave home, come to a pre-professional program or dancing more. Um,
Mm-hmm.
she really highlighted the nutritional aspect of it
Yeah.
and how much they're seeing or have seen in the past that it really affects specifically this age group and these types of injuries. So
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of the genesis of this. I mentioned that to Derek, and then he mentioned that you came on, and it's just like this awesome um, wave of information and excitement. So first of all, I just want to say welcome to Creative Generations. I feel like you're going to be such a huge part of this program, especially in the last week or so that I've been talking about nutrition. It just seems like such an undervalued part of all of our us dancers, all of our career and how we think about things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, I want to start just because I know one of the beautiful things about this program is that it's former dancers talking to current dancers and, giving wisdom and using all their varied expertises in different aspects of the dance world. And
Mm-hmm.
I just think it'd be nice to hear about your dance background and how you kind of got into being a dietitian. And yeah.
Yeah. And also, I'm super excited to be here as well. I was really excited when Derek reached out, and everything seems lovely so far. For for me personally, the dance background, like most of us, grew up dancing. I went to Case Western in Ohio, in Cleveland, Ohio, and that's where I started modern, and it was very gram based. And then I danced for a small company in Ohio that was nearby. And that's how the professional career started. And that was gram based as well. And then after that, I moved to New York and trained with the Jose Limon Dance Company for about a
Ooh,
year. It's really cool. I
yeah.
love them. And this was still when Carla Maxwell was the artistic director. So it was a long time ago. And during that period of time, I was freelancing a lot and danced with some really awesome choreographers out there in New York. And then I just kind of got to a point where, like a lot of dancers experience, I went through a year where I was kind of going through a work drought. I was getting really exhausted and burnt out, and was then kind of thinking, before I decided to pursue dance, I was thinking about going into nutrition. I
Mhm.
was thinking about it a lot because part of what was going on that year was I was really injured, and getting my injuries were really, really bad at that point. And I had some weird food stuff going on with my immune system and was actually hitting a lot of markers for reds.
Mm.
So at that point, I had seen a dietitian and was kind of thinking, this is actually pretty cool and necessary. And she didn't specialize in dancers, but then decided to pursue nutrition and went back to school and got my master's in science at Drexel in Philadelphia. I continued to dance this whole time because I didn't want to stop. So it was just really nice and I loved it. And then I I worked on a study on metabolic health and metabolic research on athletes while I was in grad school, which was really cool as well, because then I got to see things like DEXA scans in person, which is the gold standard for measuring bone mineral density and body fat percentage. We did
Hmm.
a lot of work with metabolic carts for resting metabolic rate, gold standards, and VO2 max. One of the things for that, as an aside, was that I tried so hard to get dancers to come in because it was just really rough. But one of the criteria for that study was that people couldn't engage in physical activity for 24 hours before the study because that impacts your metabolic rate. And all of the dancers said no. We can't do that. We can't take a day off. We don't know if our rehearsal director is going to let us do that. So I think that's actually kind of a good segue into all of this. I remember having that mindset for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, so after, you know, going through school, doing the internship year, then I immediately went into working with eating disorders and also tried to stay connected to the dance community. I don't necessarily want to pair the stereotype of eating disorders to dance. However, the stereotype does come from somewhere, and REDS a lot of the time can be a precursor to eating disorders.
Yes.
So as I continue to do this more, I see it more and more and work with many dancers. I don't want to say that all of them have eating disorders or REDS. Some of them just work with me to get more education and know what they need for their body. But yeah, it's been great. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah. So first of all, awesome. Uh, that sounds really amazing. And I commend you for going back to school and being able to do that and now having this amazing career. I've thought about going back to school. It's never really happened.
It's a commitment
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
I don't know if that's my personality type, but I commend you for that. And obviously you're doing great work. So thank you for that. Let's talk about what REDS is. Can you kind of give
Yes,
a definition of that and kind of just let us know, um, yeah, with the meaning of REDS and how we can fall into it and how we can get out of it and
for
um,
sure. So, as we keep saying REDS, REDS stands for Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport. It's spelled RED dash S, but it's pronounced REDS. What REDS is a continuation or an expansion on female athlete triad, which is really out of date. It only addressed cis women. It only addressed low energy availability, which means essentially not eating enough or your body not having adequate energy storage to fuel the level of physical activity that you are engaging in, and then also synthesize more muscles and continue to keep you going. So, low energy availability leads to menstrual dysfunction or not getting someone's period, and also bone mineral density loss, so osteoporosis or osteopenia. REDS expands upon that, thank goodness, because it doesn't only affect cis women and it doesn't only affect those three things. So now it expands on almost all of the organ systems. So if you have low energy availability, that can also affect your gastrointestinal tract. People can have a lot of stomach upset. I see a lot of IBS develop because of that. People can have immune system issues. Maybe they're getting sick a lot, which is also a sign of burnout. People, with injury, which already goes into bone mineral density, it's really common to have bony injuries from nutritional deficiencies. But
Mhm.
also now there's more and more research that's starting to connect nutritional deficiencies with soft tissue injuries as well for dancers. So I don't want to say it's new at this point, but that's something that's starting to be validated more and more in research. Yeah, we have everything. There can be hormonal disorders. There can be trying to think of like cardiac disorders. That's the one I was searching for, which is really scary, honestly, because heart failure is very common, especially in eating disorders. And a lot of the times, just as a note, doctors can miss it because I don't know if any of the dancers who are listening to this have heard it or you. A doctor will say, oh, you're just young and healthy. If you
Hmm.
have a really low resting heart rate or really low blood pressure, which, yes, is an adaptation from being physically active and an athlete, but that can also be a sign that your heart is having to work so much harder than necessary to get you to do the things you're asking to do it, or just like getting from a seated position to standing up, which is a sign also that can come from not having enough energy in your body and not taking enough in, so not eating enough. On top of that, it also goes into now mental health and recognizing that reds can also indicate increased depression, anxiety, burnout, things that are really common for dancers and what makes dancers really susceptible to reds in particular, especially the mental health component, are because there's a lot of like yes person personality types of like, I'll do it. And I might not want to, I might hurt myself. And again, injuries, one of the components as well that's been incorporated, but I'm going to do it anyway because this person told me to do it and I need the job or I want the opportunity. Perfectionism is also really common, which is not possible. We cannot be perfect. Something that
Yeah.
my best dance teachers actually said to me and some choreographers were that sometimes the mistakes in what you're doing are the things that lead to changes in choreography that can actually be quite beautiful. It's a little cheesy, but I remember hearing that a lot when I was
It's
dancing.
absolutely true, though. I mean,
Right. So I think with that too, like striving for perfection can be heightened anxiety and lead to depression and lead to pressure and pushing yourself beyond your capacity, not listening to your body. And I think with that, then yes, we get injuries. We also have decreased performance, which has been incorporated. So not being able to jump as high, everything is harder. Maybe you're worn out more now than you used to be. Like, and that's not necessarily just an age thing, because honestly, we shouldn't have that much of a difference between 18 to 22 or something like that.
yeah.
But it could be like I'm sore all of the time now. I'm just having a really hard time doing the things that I need to do. I'm tired. So reds encompasses all of these things, which is so important. And it really does address that athletes, especially dancers, because of some of those qualities, are highly susceptible to developing reds.
Yeah. I mean, that's to me, what's so surprising is that not only have I never heard of this, but anyone that I talk to has never heard about it. And I wonder
Yeah.
if because of, particularly in dance, because of the stigma of eating disorders and disordered eating, that it's somewhat of a taboo topic. So I don't know if we as dancers and as teachers and mentors, we kind of shy away from it because of that. But what do you think? Where do you think that gap in information comes from? Why do you think it's so, or at least it seems like it's not talked about?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I wish, and I'm sure that a lot of us who are no longer doing it professionally and are maybe becoming more aware of it are asking the same question. I believe, or my take is that dance kind of exists in this insular bubble, and some of maybe the old school attitudes and behaviors have gotten passed down.
Hmm.
And that's just my take on it. I respect and love the teachers that I had, but there were not conversations about nutrition and there were not conversations about rest. I mean, it's a personal thing, but I remember breaking my toe at one point. Probably most dancers have done at some point. And I still danced. I turned on my heel for the period of time, but I do remember my teacher really, really praising me for still like dancing and getting up and putting in the effort. When in the
Grit.
grand scheme of things, it's the teacher's responsibility to say, hey, you're still growing. That plate isn't done developing and it's broken. Sit out. you don't get to do anything until it's better versus praising the effort. So I think that things like that definitely get passed down, and it's hard to break away from that. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but when I was growing up, water wasn't allowed in studios either.
No,
So,
to me, it's
yeah,
crazy because like our three kids have water bottles they carry around everywhere, and I think
yeah.
it's but in the studio now there are 30 some odd water bottles just hanging out all the time, which is awesome. But yeah, in
Hmm.
our time that didn't happen. There was a water fountain that was 3 flights of stairs that way,
Exactly. And
always.
they would only let you drink the water right before you would jump. So you'd
Yep.
have to have a tiny bit of water. But
Yeah.
yeah, that stuff sticks with you. So I think that even though, and I'm so happy that you're here and we're having this conversation because it leads to more information, but I think part of it has to do with sticking to tradition and becoming a little bit more informed as the generations go on. But I also just don't think that dancers have the same opportunities as maybe the NFL, for example,
Oh,
or a sports
yeah.
league that has all of that funding. So a lot of the time, it takes effort from the teachers and from the dancers to go outside of their environment and seek out this information because we don't have, or a lot of companies don't have the money or the funding to have personal trainers come in, physical therapists on board round the clock, to have dietitians on call and everything. So, and doctors on call as well. And then you also need doctors who are informed in this, dietitians and physical
Yeah.
therapists who are informed in this to be able to tell someone to sit out and really explain it. And I think the hard thing is that for a lot of dancers, they still might not take that advice and they still will keep going and push themselves and then eventually learn the hard way that something will not turn out well, something will break. And in the Olympic Committee, the IOC has a whole screening process that athletes have to go through. And they do have criteria that designate when an athlete can no longer compete because they are high risk in REDS. And that essentially is organ failure, eating disorder, like you're going beyond here. Dancers don't have that. So we just don't have the education. And yeah, I don't know. I wish I knew the answer why it wasn't as familiar,
Yeah.
but
Wow. Yeah, I when you were talking about money and lack of funding and things, I thought about my own experience when I um got out of high school. I went to North Carolina School of the Arts. Shout out
mhm.
CSA, any pickles out there. Um, when I was there, my last 2 years of high school, we had a wonderful cafeteria, loving staff. Like it was very much a family. Um, and I was very well provided for. And then I went to Houston and had no money and
Mhm.
no time. And my nutrition, especially in developing with food, definitely took a dive. And I remember, eating candy bars for lunch because it was the cheapest thing in the grocery store.
Mhm.
Um, and that kind of progressed for a year or two into my professional career where I was developing these really disordered behaviors and not a great relationship with food or rest or taking care of my body. Um,
Mhm.
and I think you touched on it, but it's hard because dancers, we don't have a lot of money. And there
Right.
is that idea of like, if you push through it, if you can make it, then you'll get some kind of reward.
Mhm.
Um, but I guess I'm wondering like, how do we curb that
Yeah.
mindset? And then how, as a dancer, as someone who's in the moment living through these disordered behaviors and feels like maybe it's a little overwhelming, maybe I'm starting to get unhealthy.
Mhm.
What's your advice for someone in that situation?
Yeah, and that's tough because I do think a lot of it comes from noticing yourself something's not right. And that is the responsibility ultimately of each dancer. And
Hmm.
signs to look out for because again, I think a lot of dancers are just go, go, go. I have to learn the choreography. I have to go to class. I have to get this opportunity. And again, I get it. You and I have both been there, but noticing like am I not eating? I kind of like what you said. I remember for a long time just having like one meal a day. And that's the information I was hearing from the artistic director I was with for a long time in Ohio. Like,
Mm.
again, he really promoted that. So I don't think that's happening anymore. But again, I think I have to also do a shout out too. I think there's a big concern with physique. And it's something that we also can't deny and we can't tiptoe around anymore because that adds a lot of pressure to dancers. So I also think that they're more prone to maybe limiting their energy intake or how much they eat, which also puts them at high risk for REDS as well. You mentioned that earlier. But I think that noticing these signs yourself, are you getting more tired? How is your mental health doing? Are you noticing more injuries develop? Are you noticing like maybe you have stomach problems now and you didn't used to have stomach problems now? You're getting sick a lot. Or like you're saying, like just not eating enough. It's the individual's responsibility to notice these changes, say something's wrong, and then go ask for help. And I know that help is not easy. So that's why I love Creative Generations because reaching out to Creative Generations and saying something's wrong, like I'm here as a dietitian. I can always do consults and meet with people if there's really big questions and help assess. We have a wonderful therapist with us as
Mhm.
well. She's awesome. So she's really helpful for the mental health component. There's amazing mentors who are professional dancers or former professional dancers as well. So there's so much support. Other ones, if that's not available, Google is a powerful tool. Not to Google what's going on with me because WebMD will tell you you have cancer.
Yes.
Or the YouTube video of this is what I eat in a day as a dancer, which is never enough, will
Yeah.
pop up. And looking up like nutritionists, dancers, or something and seeing what pops up. The dietitian field is very small. So the likelihood that if you do Google something like that and you talk to someone and you can't afford them, they'll be able to find someone else who can tell you what to do. And again, for any type of advice, be ask your doctor. Um, your doctor knows nothing about nutrition. Don't listen to nutrition advice about your doctor. But I'm saying that if you need a referral to see someone, I think it's just paying attention. The other one is for other dancers and teachers and choreographers and artistic directors to notice these things as well,
Yes.
because
So, what
that's
do you?
a hard conversation to have. But if you notice, like, this dancer is not going to lunch, also making sure that there's room for lunch breaks.
Yeah.
Um, I never see this person eat. I only like they're constantly injured, they're sick a lot, and they're still coming into rehearsals. They just don't look good. They're losing a lot of weight, and viewing that as a negative, not as a positive, is really important. Saying something to them and then providing a recommendation to likely a dietitian or nutritionist that's affordable and trying to get them support. Those are all signs that something's really, really wrong.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. Just as a
Mhm.
teacher, how do we approach this topic? And, um, I've seen things in the past where, say, a dancer will be injured and they'll be off for a long time and they'll come back from that injury and
Mhm.
they're working hard, they're looking good, and then there's this tipping point where, it goes too far. Um,
Mhm.
and I guess as the teacher at the front of the room, my whole thing, and I think all of our whole things, is just taking care of the person. Um,
Right.
at the end of the day, if they want to be a dancer, great. If they want to be an accountant, great. Just
Mhm.
they need to be like a good whole person.
Right.
But you know, when you're seeing that tipping point, it's such a fine line, and I wonder. This is just just talking out loud. Like, how do we
Mhm.
approach them before it's too late? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that these are really good points and it's really delicate and gentle. Like for example, I don't love saying I'm an eating disorder specialist when I'm meeting dancers for the first time if they don't already know,
Hmm.
because I think it makes them anxious, especially if they know that they're struggling with their body image or food. So, I mean, hey, when I was younger and I think I was like 20, a dietitian was brought to my college to talk to us. And like, I was shut off. Like, I didn't want to listen to it. I didn't care. I knew she was going to tell me to eat more. No. So, if someone's really shut off to it, they don't want to hear it. But I think approaching it delicately, and again, like you as a teacher know your dancers better than I do. So, someone might need to hear it overtly. Someone might need to be pulled away in private and have a delicate conversation, more in the realm of, I'm concerned, and really emphasizing it's not about how you dance. You're a beautiful dancer. I'm not criticizing that. You're great. And really constantly going back to that part so that the dancer isn't taking it personally or thinking it's about their body, but reflecting there's some there's something that I'm noticing in terms of I notice that you push yourself too hard. And I'm noticing that like you're getting injured a lot and I'm concerned because I want you to be with us for a long time. And I want to try to figure out how we can get you to a point where that's not happening as much anymore. And I want you to do this for a long time. Or maybe if it is just kind of like I just don't I don't see you as happy as you used to be, rather than language of not motivated or something, because that can push someone farther. If someone's never eating, then sometimes it's gentle to do things on kind of like a back end, because that's so sensitive of like, hey, everyone, we're taking lunch. No one should be in the studio right now. And then just kind of seeing someone, because I know a lot of dancers will stay in the studio just in case and just say like you guys have to get outside. Also, for vitamin D purposes, you have to get outside. It improves mental health or something like that. Just knowing like did everyone have their lunch or something like that. Trainers in other athletic teams where there's funding are responsible for looking at these things with their players and saying you're not allowed to practice unless you do these things. So that's really harsh, but potentially even getting as aggressive if it's happening with multiple dancers. I can't have you guys dancing if you're not eating. Like,
Yeah.
period. Like rehearsal's just not going to be as effective if you guys aren't eating. We're going into nutcracker season. It just can't happen. So some so again, you know your dancers better than anyone else. But for sure, if you start to see extreme signs, like you said, the tipping point, if you start to see anyone losing a lot of weight, that needs to be a more serious conversation and delicate away from everyone about like, I just wanted to make sure everything's okay and we need to figure out what's going on because this isn't good. A lot of the time when people lose a lot of weight, they can't see that.
Yeah, I mean, I look back at pictures of myself in my early 20s, and I still am like, oh wow, I look great, but I was completely unhealthy.
Right.
I know that
Yeah.
now. Um, so would you recommend for every dancer, whether or not they feel that they are unhealthy, or that they have these disordered behaviors, would you
Mhm.
recommend that seeing a dietitian just in general, just to get some
Totally.
individual advice? Yeah.
100%. I think going, or not, I think, but a lot of the research on dancers are flawed, and I understand why completely. But constantly, with every single study that has been published on this topic for dancers, no one is eating enough,
Hmm.
period. Like, and ballet dancers have the lowest intake out of any of the styles that have danced on those studies, which I really appreciate because they look at modern and breakdancing. And I think that they also did Irish dancing or something, but ballet dancers are always at the lowest. They always have the lowest body fat percentage, which is not necessarily a good thing. They're always at the highest risk for injury. So, that is a very high risk population. But yeah, I think that there's no harm in trying to talk to a dietitian and get some type of consult to just hear these are some of the tweaks that you can make to avoid these things if someone just wants that information. And also, there are always options when we can't afford food. Like, there are so many options to get those needs met. I'm here in California, so CalFresh is an option, and I recommend it to everyone. based off of your income, you get a certain amount to grocery shop every month. A lot of the people who I work with who have used CalFresh benefits get like $200 plus, but again, it's based off of income. Yeah,
Wow.
so with like your reaction, like that's a
That's great.
lot. That can get you a lot as a dancer. So I think that's a great benefit that we're not taking advantage of, or the 99-cent store, which I know a lot of people scoff at, but they have some pretty good produce. And why not get a discount like every single thing if we're worried about how much food you're going to get? I think it's also great to talk to a dietitian because sometimes, not sometimes, diet culture is a really big thing. And also, I never recommend teachers providing nutrition advice because a lot of the times it's not going to be helpful information.
Yeah.
And with that, sometimes dancers can end up eating less and less and less, or choosing foods that aren't going to support them through rehearsal, like carrots and celery, which gets you through maybe one or two plies, and that's it.
Yes.
So versus like, I want you to have some pretzels and I also need you to have like a banana or something like that. So it's helpful to get nutrition consulting regardless. It's just like a tiny little check-in versus assuming and maybe getting away with it for a long time, but it's not going to last for forever.
Yeah, I appreciate what you said about not necessarily taking advice or giving advice as a teacher, because I feel like a lot of times students will come to me and colleagues and ask, not necessarily nutritional advice, because as we talked about, nobody talks about it, but um, injury advice. Like they'll say, "Oh, my knee is hurting. What should I do?" And I'm
Hmm.
always really hesitant because I'm like, I'm not a doctor. I don't know anatomy, but maybe
Hmm.
you be a doctor or.
Right. Yeah.
But I think that's important because we all want to help, and I think some teachers are more um, willing to offer that advice than others. And
Hmm.
sometimes, even though it might be the best intentioned, it can be harmful and it can do more harm than good. So I think that's
Exactly.
important that you mentioned that. Maybe don't listen to your teacher or nutrition.
Right. Yeah, scope of practice is a really big one. And I think listening to your teacher about movement and the areas that they excel in is super important. But if, your teacher is telling you to ice for a certain amount of time or, rest for a certain amount of time, yeah, it's good to just get that checked out by a professional just in case. And also, yeah, for nutrition, I think of it because like you said, people don't talk about it at all, which is concerning. And I think it's because a lot of people in dance are confused about it and no one wants to say it openly, which is why I'm happy again about creative generations because it can open up opportunities for conversations a little bit more. But I was talking at a school at one point, and one of the teachers kept talking about how little they have for breakfast. And the entire time I was just thinking, why are you saying it? Like, what is this the hill you want to die on? We're going back and forth in front
Oh
of all of the
God.
students about how this is unhelpful information. Like, no, this is so weird. So I think knowing and being discerning about what your body needs, we know what our bodies need more than anyone else. So thinking of that, if someone's saying something that we don't think works well, again, I know in diet culture right now, there's a big carbs are bad thing that's been going on for a long time. That doesn't work for athletes, and dancers are athletes. It actually, I don't recommend it for anyone, but it really doesn't work for dancers because that is the fuel that you need to get through these long days.
Yeah.
So if you're doing low carb, you're probably going to get hurt or you're not going to be performing to your best ability. And that's really what it comes down to. But we I think I just don't think that we have good information out there and it's tough. But a lot of people want to help. A lot of teachers do want to jump in. It's just not the most helpful a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think, something you mentioned at the top of this when we were talking about previous generations and just kind of the culture of dance and, I think ballet in particular is that
Hmm.
maybe it's as we grow older or as our teachers grew older, it becomes this like I had it harder than you did. And there's a point of
Hmm.
pride there. And like, we danced through this injury and we ate this little for breakfast. And I think that is still apparent. And if we can, this generation
Hmm.
kind of make a shift to that's not the way it should be. We should all be looking out for each
Right.
other and we should all be taking care of each other.
Hmm.
I think that's kind of like what you were saying with that teacher talking about how little they had for breakfast.
Yeah.
Like it's not something to be proud of. At the end of the day, there's no award for suffering and putting yourself through hell to
Mhm.
have this product. I think I know it's all individual for each dancer and each, you know, day to day, like whether you're performing, whether you're just rehearsing, whether you're in a layoff. But is there any overarching advice you would want to give to either young dancers or just dancers in general about their nutrition, about something they should think about, something that they should shy away from, anything that could be
Hmm.
taken away today?
Yeah, I think again, like it's so individualized, but general rules of thumb that I usually tell everyone is they should be eating 3 meals a day without question. There should be snacks without question. It's important to eat before your movement a carbohydrate dense meal or snack. And, there's plenty of options if it's a meal. If it's a snack, then that could be like graham crackers and fruit, or maybe like some slices of peanut butter toast. Again, I want to emphasize that's not a meal, that is a snack. Okay. Um, but making sure that if you have these long rehearsals, bringing snacks in your bag to have, or having a electrolyte dense beverage that has calories like Gatorade. That's always an option too, especially for our dancers who are heavy sweaters and their sweat is salty. It's really important to have electrolytes. And again, you need the energy. That's why something like Gatorade was developed. And then afterwards, making sure that you're having a solid snack or meal that has carbohydrates and protein. So, again, meal a little easier, but snacks, chocolate milk is considered one of the best recovery drinks out there. You can have a protein shake. Maybe in that case, you have PB&J plus a banana, or maybe a Cliff Bar or another protein bar that's, again, I keep saying denser, and it's just because there's more nutritional density than something like maybe an RX bar that doesn't have as much in it. Nothing against RX bar. I'm not sponsored by Cliff or Gatorade, but they're just brands that happen to be pretty good for athletes in that sense. Those are always general ones, and knowing like listening to your body cues or starting to get more familiar with your cues as well. Like just more abstract questions that I always ask people is what does hunger feel like to you? And what does fullness feel like to you? To become better attuned to those signs. For example, when I'm in class now, or when I was dancing a lot more before, if I was getting a little tired or like noticing that I was having a harder time picking up choreography, which would usually happen around Petit Allegro for me when I was dancing, I needed a snack. I was getting pretty hungry, but that's me. That's my quote unquote dancer hunger cue in that sense.
Yeah,
It's not always your stomach growling. It might be something before then. And that's why, yeah, I think all dancers should have snacks in their bag and water and electrolytes. If you sweat more, you need more fluids. If you have salty sweat, you need more electrolytes. So that's where it gets individualized. But yeah, I think it's a lot, but those are general recommendations that I would provide to everyone to start off with.
that's great. Um, well, this has been really informative, and I'm again just so happy that you're a part of this program and that we were able to have this conversation. And um, I can't tell you how amazed I am again that nobody talks about this stuff, and it's so present. And it's
Hmm.
something that we all should be thinking about. We all should be talking about. And hopefully, conversations like this can really get the ball rolling and get it more recognized.
Hmm. Definitely. Yeah. And I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy that, Derek reached out in the first place. But this this is why people like me are here, honestly, the dietitians who really help dancers and are passionate about it, because likely we've experienced the same thing or had a dancer in our life who has. So we just want to help everyone. That's
Yeah,
it. We just want to help bring the conversation out into the open.
absolutely. Um, well, thank you for talking to me, and
Yeah.
hope you have a good rest of your Sunday.
You too. You have a good one as well. It was nice talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk again soon. And let's keep this conversation going. Hopefully
Definitely.
everybody and their mom listens to this and we all have lots of nutritional questions that I can send your way. Um, yeah, this is great.
Yeah. Anytime. It was really nice talking to you.